responsibility for the government's response to the sinking of the Sewol ferry, in which more than 300 people were killed. Robert Kelly joins us now via Skype from Busan in South Korea. He's a professor of political science and diplomacy at Busan National University. Welcome to the program. So, disbanding the Coast Guard, a drastic move by the president in a very dramatic statement.
Yeah, it was a big speech, and it was a surprisingly deep-cutting speech. Issues of corruption and personalism and networking in Korea run deep. I mean, it's sort of standard operating procedure in Korea, and she said she's going to start to root that stuff out. That's actually a pretty big deal. That goes after the roots of her coalition, which include big business and the elderly who grew up in that very traditional, personalistic Korea. And if she's really serious about rule of law and meritocracy, it's going to get pretty disruptive. So it was a gutsy speech, very much.
Will everyone be happy with just the measures she's announced? So there seemed to be a really strong desire for revenge right after that ferry disaster anyway, with calls for the captain of the ferry to be executed.
Yeah, actually a lot of people don't know this, but South Korea still has the death penalty. They're actually retaining that primarily because if there's unification, I think the Kim family in the north will probably face execution, actually. But yes, the captain is probably responsible for the negligent homicide of several hundred people, and I suppose it's possible the prosecutor will seek it. It would be pretty big if that happened, but this is also pretty terrible. That's faded a little bit. I think the issue has begun to shift from sort of the personal issues of what did the crew do and whatever to the larger structural issues. There were a whole number of things that aggravated the sinking. The ship was overloaded. It didn't have enough ballast. It wasn't properly built. It was too old. And a lot of those things, to be perfectly honest, were beyond the responsibility of the crew. That doesn't alleviate the crew's sort of negligence, but there were a whole pile of structural issues, and that's before, and that's really what Park was talking about, right? Sort of rooting out all these corruption issues in the larger bureaucracy.
Now, the president made yet another apology in this speech, but for the first time, she's expected personal responsibility for how the government handled the disaster. We also saw her shed tears in her address. What do you think this is going to do, if anything, to help her approval ratings, which were hit following that disaster?
Yeah, she took a real big hit. Her approval ratings dropped by 10% in a month. They're under 50% for the first time in her presidency. The tears will get a lot of focus. She's known as the Ice Queen. That's sort of the reputation she has, particularly among the opposition. She's considered to be cold and aloof, and she doesn't connect well with people and stuff like that. Her opposition has made an issue of this in the past. So there will be a discussion about whether or not the tears were real or not. I don't want to comment on that. It looked authentic to me, and I haven't watched the speech live myself. It looked real. I mean, she genuinely looked moved, which is sort of new for her, I think, in public. And, she mentioned the names of people who had tried to help and stuff like that. I think that also helped to add a personal touch. She's taken a lot of hit with mothers. She's had her poll numbers have really collapsed with mothers under the age of 40. And that might be one of the reasons why she emphasized the personal thing, because she needs to sort of reach out to that centric band of voters who are leaving her.
Hey, Robert, you've compared President Park's response to the ferry disaster with U.S. President George Bush's response to Hurricane Katrina. How so?
Yeah, well, they're both very similar, I think. Both President Park and President Bush were elected, I would say, primarily because of their last name. There was a lot of sort of dynasticism in it, and there were always questions lurking over both of them, whether or not they were actually fully qualified to hold the offices, or if they just get elected because of who they were. And then between Iraq and Katrina, I think President Bush's reputation for competence as a good minister, as a good manager of the government was simply destroyed, and he never recovered. I think Park faces the same kind of challenge. Is she actually in the office because of her name? Her father was president. Is she in there because she wants to rehabilitate him? He has a reputation as a dictator. Or is she in there because she actually really can manage the Korean government? I mean, it's a modern state, right? Korea's got 52 million people. It's got a big government, probably, I think, 1 or 2 million civil servants. It's hard to manage all those people. It requires budgetary focus and competence and training with administration and management. And she never had any kind of position like that. She was never a mayor or provincial governor or anything before she became president. And so there's been a lot of focus in the Korean media that she's simply not competent. She's not able to do the job of being president. And I think that's why she had to apologize for the third time today, as you mentioned. I think that's why she had to give the speech. Because for the last month, she's looked like a deer caught in the headlights. She's just sort of like, what do I do? What do I do? And it's really taken a toll on her, and she had to sort of recover. And like I said, Bush never did. And I think this is a big turning point for her. If she doesn't get in front of this, it's going to be seen as the downward turning point of her presidency.
Robert Kelly, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, Yemen is staging its largest military offensive in years.